Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Mindful Momentum podcast. I am your host, Robin Todd, and I am thrilled today to have a very special person with me via Zoom, Austin Holt. Hi, Austin.
Hello, Robin.
Let me tell you a little bit about Austin. So, Austin is a dedicated entrepreneur, coach, and best-selling author who has spent the last 13 years helping others achieve success in business, life, and marriage. He speaks at international events, owns multiple businesses, and is passionate about guiding others to growth. Austin lives on a farm with his wife, Rachel. There are 4 children where they homeschool, embrace homesteading, and enjoy a variety of hobbies together. So I'm so excited, Austin, to have you here to learn about what contributes to your success and how you nurture others to grow. Obviously, you got it going on, and we can all learn from that. So, so welcome. Thank you so much for being here. So let's just start out. Tell us a little bit about your background, how you came to this point. Let us get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, so growing up in the Kansas City area my whole life, I've lived in probably the same 15, 20-mile bubble just about my whole life. So born and raised here. Professionally, I always had some type of business, whether that was, when I was 14, I was mowing yards and teaching guitar lessons and detailing cars. And that, of course, escalated into all sorts of other things. But the bulk of my background then was real estate, specifically commercial real estate. And I was the youngest real estate broker in America for a little while, which was kind of cool. Beat
Wow.
Rush Limbaugh on at Age of Licensing, which was kind of a fun little random thing I figured out years later. But so got into real estate really heavy and had a really cool career in real estate. And after just a season of really a lot of success in real estate, I realized that I just enjoyed helping other people do that even more. And I had friends kind of coming out of the woodwork saying, how'd you get into real estate? How did you, because I did commercial, I represented national companies, and just people wanted to know how I was able to figure it out. And I'm like, well, I here's how I did it. And so I kind of got asked to become a coach before I really offered coaching. And that, I think, was my sign from God that, coaching was really where my heart was at, was helping other people create success. And then I figured out that I could create a lot of success by helping other people create a lot of success. And that combo got me really excited. So I got into full-time coaching, and like you said in your summary earlier, that encompasses, business coaching, life coaching, and for me, most important, marriage coaching. And so that's pretty much what my time is filled with today professionally. And we also own a couple other companies. We own a big HR company and some other things, and where it's, and we'll talk about this, as we get into the episode, but, mindfulness, thankfully, is such a foundational kind of more DNA type upgrade that you can't help but, not be mindful, in everything. And so, mindfulness has kind of been used to enhance, both my professional world, my personal life, and so much that, I went on to get certified so that I can use it in other people's world. But that's a little bit of my background. And so
Great. Awesome.
Lots of hobbies. I'm a hobby guy. Spend
Yeah.
time at church, a lot of time with my wife and kids, and playing around on the farm and messing with the animals, and
Well, you can tell that you enjoy what you do. You sound inspired, which is what we all hope to be in our life's work. Yeah, with purpose. So tell us a little bit. Let's go a little deeper into kind of how you landed on mindfulness. What kind of road took you to the realization of mindfulness, and how has it impacted, your life and your work? And tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, part of the bigger origin for me of mindfulness was really first osmosing it, from you. And so not a lot of people may know this part of the story, but, originally I met, met you because I was doing some consulting work for Mindful Momentum, and just my proximity to you and my proximity to, the mindful world. And, being in coaching, I had some experience to mindfulness, but I think a lot of people, when they hear the word mindfulness, they think, oh, I'm just a mindful person. And that's what I always thought it was. And
Mhm.
really until my work with you and then being coached by you and then having you coach my wife Rachel as well is really what helped me understand that mindfulness was not really what I thought it was. Mindfulness is more, of a state of being than it is an activity, or maybe even an attribute. It's more of a way of living. To live mindfully is different than to be a person who is mindful of the weather, mindful of people, mindful of the economy, mindful of etc. And so it was really that initial proximity to you that really led to both my wife and I really kind of going down the rabbit hole. Then, of course, getting certified, and then, of course, being in the coaching world, kind of the coaching counseling world for a long time. I feel like over the last 5, 6 years, mindfulness has gotten a lot more traction, and so I think a lot of people want to believe they have a mindful component to different certifications or programs or coaching modalities, but really there's nothing that can really replace what my experience has been is there's mindful flavored coaching modalities,
Mhm.
also really the root mindfulness. And for me to get to experience mindfulness, you've got to go all the way. You can't just dip your toe in the pool. Jumping into something like the Live Mindful certification program is a must, I think, for anyone like me who's built a career or building a career off of coaching. And I've studied almost every interdiscipline in the psychology world, the coaching world, and as I synthesize across all of that, really at the base of all of it is mindfulness.
Mhm.
Whether you call it awareness or consciousness, or there's so many different ways to call it, but ultimately, the root of all self-awareness, which is really the root of all coaching. You can't coach without
Mhm.
self-awareness. That's
Right.
teaching. That's different. And the root of all self-awareness starts with mindfulness. That's the aperture, like that's the gate. You got to go through the gate of mindfulness before you can be self-aware. And if you're not self-aware, you can't be others aware because you'll just project all your own stuff anyways.
Yeah, I know. Isn't it amazing? I mean, I feel like in conversations I have with people all the time, it ultimately goes back to that foundation of mindfulness. Any kind of work we want to do,
Yeah.
personal, professional,
Yeah.
any relationship, any goal, any direction we want to move. It really is the foundation. And I know I'm a little, I was like, I know I'm a little partial, but it's true. It really is. Because without that awareness, that self understanding, nobody's going to change.
Yeah, that's right. And
Or they're going to go through the motions of changing, but not really truly change.
yeah, and if it's not integrated really into your nervous system,
Yeah.
then you use it too reactively.
Hmm.
You can, where, something like an event happens, whether it's traumatic or even a great event, that your nervous system has a hard time handling how great it is, right?
Hmm.
If mindfulness isn't really integrated into your nervous system, you're too far reactive, meaning hours, days, weeks after an event, you might try to reflect back on it. But what I try to help people understand is if you really have a practice of mindfulness, then you're mindful all the time, And so, like, I can even remember, back when, my oldest daughter, this was 10 years ago, ended up in the NICU when she was born. And I remember being in tears outside of the NICU, and luckily, praise God, she's totally fine, and just she's a total super genius, rambunctious, crazy girl now, but she's amazing. But I remember even just being outside in the hospital room, and luckily I had mindfulness training by that point, and I was able to just naturally move into it, versus suffering for days or weeks or months, and then later looking back and trying to be mindful about what happened back then. But I was able to utilize it when it mattered, the present moment.
Yeah.
I think for a lot of people that don't have mindfulness deep in their nervous system, it's not in the present moment with them, it's an afterthought,
Right. Right.
and that's a really big difference, I think, from reading a book about mindfulness to doing something like a certification is
Yeah.
rather than it being a cognitive choice later based on pain to go choose mindful, you don't really go into the present moment without being mindful.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's superpower.
Well, and I think that's such a huge difference between people who practice it, right? It either becomes part of who you are and you start to just naturally approach challenges, difficulties. hope, love, all the good stuff, all the hard stuff with mindfulness, or it is something separate that you do in your life, right? And I'm not saying there's no judgment with that, but we certainly know that if we can just embed it in who we are, it becomes who we are. And I think that is what I find is that um, in the space of counselors and life coaches and those who are serving others, they may know a lot of this here,
Yeah,
right? In the prefrontal cortex. Like, I know all the things to tell others to do. But what I find across the board is that they don't necessarily embody it themselves, right? They don't give themselves the opportunity to live it, and they just think if they tell others, and it starts with us. No matter who we're trying to coach or train or share, um, we have to start with us. And oh, I just find, like many things, sometimes when we're in the space of serving others, we don't serve ourselves well by giving our own self-care, and what a gift, because it's difficult work.
yeah,
And I think really to be sustainable in this space, um, you have to at some point do the hard work yourself.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's got to be a lifestyle.
Yeah.
I one of my mottos in life, and I stole this from what's called the Navy SEAL Frogman's Code. Anything in life that's worth doing is worth overdoing. And so for me, it's I look at everything in my life in with kind of three words, and even we were doing a marriage training a few weeks ago, and this is something that I encouraged this large group of people to think about was three. Everyone has their word that they bring into the new year. A lot of people. I don't know when this trend started, like 3 or 4 years ago, maybe. My word is resilience, or my word is growth, or my word is money, or whatever it is. Um, but in my mind, I'm like, well, my word is ribeye. I love. That's all I want every day is just ribeye,
I love to hear people's words. Honestly, it gives me an insight into like
right?
what their intentions are, but it's kind of fun. I forget to make my word. Sometimes I do a word. Sometimes people prompt me to do a word, and then I'm like, ooh, that's good. Yeah, whatever.
Well,
Ribeye. Hmm.
uh, the three words that I encouraged because hey, I don't limit myself to one word. So,
Yeah,
life to me, life is a buffet, and I get to pick whatever I want and leave whatever I want behind. And so when people are like, "What's your one word?" I'm like, "Well, what if I have 40 words?" But anyways,
yeah.
so the three words I told this group was identity, lifestyle, community. And if you really want to 180 your life or elevate your life or change or create or anything, it's got to start with an identity shift. Okay, like I am a mindful person. I'm not a person who uses mindfulness. I am a mindful person. So therefore, I do mindful things, right? That's number one. Number two is lifestyle. Okay, if I am a mindful person, then my lifestyle will reflect mindfulness. How I
Mhm.
spend my money, where I spend my time, how I love people, how I love myself, how I'm reverent or spiritual, right? And then if your identity is mindfulness and your lifestyle is mindfulness, then inevitably your community will be mindful. Okay?
Mhm.
Because think about if you're a tennis player. Okay? I am a tennis player. My lifestyle is made up of tennis practice, games, shopping for clothing and rackets and just the tennis ball. Well, and then inevitably your community becomes tennis players because
Right.
that's what you do, right? And so I think mindfulness could really be deeply woven into those three words.
Mm.
And that's why, you asked how did I wind up here? I'm passionate about helping people understand the impact, that mindfulness can have in all three of those things in their life, right? Because
Mhm.
if someone were to say, what are the top five things in your life that, as like you asked earlier, helped create success or change your trajectory? Well, I would say, my faith in God, my marriage, and then these practices that I've bolted on that have changed my life, like mindfulness.
Mhm.
And when you become a mindful person, and then your world changes around you, and then
Mhm.
change around you too, because you changed first. And
Right.
sometimes it's not even that the people change, it's your perception of them, which
Yeah.
feels like they're changing, where, you become mindful and instead of someone attacking you, you realize they're crying for love.
Yeah.
Mindfulness would say rather than looking at someone as being, stupid, you might say, oh, they could just be uninformed. It changes the way you see everyone and everything, and they benefit from it, but you benefit from it like the
Right.
most, you know?
Yeah. It's a lens. It's a lens by which we see others and see ourselves and see every obstacle and challenge and circumstance. Yeah. What you're describing with those first two is really our aim.
Yeah.
Who
Yep.
do I, who, what's the direction I want to be moving,
Yeah.
right? And then that last one, of course, is our me, we. It's this understanding that my life affects you and your life affects me.
Yeah.
And we have this reciprocal relationship, whether we want it to or not, right?
There were these other three words I made up years ago. It's attitude, attention, and aim. And
Sounds familiar.
they're just three guiding words that I use in my mindfulness
Eh,
practice. If you want to use them sometime,
wow.
you know.
I might. Those are great. Those are great. Well, and it's honestly, it makes me think of a client of mine sent me an article. It was the Surgeon General's letter as he was, exiting his role in the last administration, and he basically, I mean, it's a beautiful letter, and he really highlighted his belief. And of course, he's the Surgeon General that really promoted a few years ago that loneliness is one of the top culprits of everything going on, in people's lives. So he is very mindful, intuitive in that. But he talked about, and I might butcher this, but one was connection with others, which is so important, which of course we need to be mindful to have that. One of them was service, serving others. And then the last one was a sense of purpose.
Wow. Yeah.
And yeah, it's a beautiful letter if anyone has a chance to look that up. But it just, it's all aligned with what we all hunger for and
Yeah.
need and ultimately want. But to get there is the challenge, right? That why we're here and why we do what we do.
That letter was amazing. And, connection with others is so key because one of the most substantive roots of addiction is a lack of connection with others.
Yeah,
It's a lack of connection to people and to life, and so
yeah,
you form a connection and attachment with addiction, right? And service is so powerful because service translates to significance. If I can be in service of another, I feel
yeah.
significant. I don't think people realize that till they're mindful. Like
Hmm.
do it. They do it out of what feel like obligation.
Right.
And there's another cool article. Well, actually, it was a study that was done by this. I believe it was the CIA in their interrogation team, and they talked about how one of the most ways people can be manipulated is if they're being pressured by fear, obligation, or guilt. They call it fog. And I think most people, they're constantly driven by this fog idea, fear, obligation, guilt.
Hmm.
Become mindful. What they That's often how a narcissist would manipulate someone is through fear, obligation, or guilt.
Hmm.
And mindfulness helps people be more aware of what actually is driving them because we don't want it to be fear, obligation, or guilt. We want it to be significance, right? So
Hmm.
serving other people out of fear or obligation or guilt is really, really unhealthy. But mindfulness helps people realize, I notice that as I'm serving people, I feel this deep sense of significance.
Hmm.
And again, the Surgeon General is literally like, when you're serving others, it's going to help you become healthy. And
Right.
so, like, again, just kind of making the case of how mindfulness is truly interwoven into the fabric of all the different perspectives on holistic health. I mean, you
Hmm.
take all the supplements and the vitamins, and you can stand in the sun all day long and do your ice baths, and it's all good. And yeah, but if you just don't have,
Hmm.
you're missing the biggest lever, of that ability to look inward, to find calm, to find the space between words, the space between moments, the space between emotions. And anyways, I like we said at the beginning of this, we could talk for hours on this.
I know we could. I love it. I love it. Well, and I'm curious, and we don't always have a chance to, I mean, over the years, we have dived into a lot of different topics, but how do you integrate this into the work that you do outside of like you and I?
Yeah, great question. So even every time I do a session with anyone, whether it's business oriented, life oriented, or marriage oriented, the first question I always ask is, what's your biggest win from over the last week? Or
Mhm.
what's something that you have been appreciating over the last week? Or what's been the greatest thing that's happened to you since the last time we met? And so at the very beginning of our time, I know that I'm gonna ask them to look within, to measure backwards instead of always measuring forwards. I think our culture has
Mhm.
an epidemic of only measuring forwards. That's not where confidence comes from. Confidence comes from evidence, which is measuring backwards. Okay. Different life coachy topic there. But so first thing I always ask is what's been some great wins? It allows them to look back, to be mindful, to go, huh, oh yeah, this thing
Mhm.
was great. This relationship's going well. This connection was great. This
Mhm.
opportunity. And so, and then,
It's shifting their spotlight, right?
it's moving their spotlight of attention to something that's going to help propel them forward. Sometimes we look at
Yeah.
that as kind of pulling the slingshot back
Mhm.
and they can go further forward, right? And then I might say, well, when you think about all those wins, what else comes up for you? You know, what story are you telling about yourself when you think about those wins? And I really get them to get into the conscious and unconscious stories they tell themselves, which is what's keeping them motivated or not. So that's one of the first things I do. One of the second things I do, the second thing I usually do is I ask the question, where have you felt resistance over the last week? And then I'm asking them to really dig down and reflect and ask themselves to be with, okay, what has gone on over the last week that has either brought me down or lowered my energy or has caused me to slow down too much or to stumble or to be frustrated or to lose heart or energy, focus, motivation, all that. And and then I'll use simple practices. Like for example, one that anyone who's watching this, should you ever go through the 9 session training that Robin offers, or go through the certification program. And if you're a coach, I would especially encourage you to do that. One is this little exercise where we imagine something that's stressful or frustrating, or just something that you need a little less proximity to, so you can study it. Is to put a thought or put an image or a word into a cloud and imagine the cloud is in the room and just slowly leaves the room. And it enables you to just have less proximity to something, less attachment to something. So that
Mhm.
way, then you can look at it a little bit more objectively, like that resistance question. Like let's say someone says, oh, I've got a client, family member, spouse, kid, neighbor, you name it, that I'm having some interpersonal conflict with. Okay, we'll put that in the cloud, we'll move it out, allow them to reflect on how they feel once the cloud has left the room. And then we can go back and go, okay, well, when you think about the object you put in the cloud now, how are you relating to it? And it's usually with a lot less fear, a lot less sadness. And so then we can actually be productive about conversations, right? And, we also use mindfulness in all sorts. Oh, good.
You're talking about being curious.
Yeah, being curious. Yep, that's right.
Hmm. Yep.
And so, and then we'll use all sorts of, mindfulness or mindfulness rooted interventions when we're helping people deal with stress, or deal with trauma, or deal with even dreaming about possibilities in the future.
Hmm.
What most people miss, especially I think in this space, is a lot of people are only mindful, or they want to use a lot of these modalities of healing for difficult things, right? Trauma, developmental trauma, difficult experiences, events, etc. I'm in the camp that believes that a lot of people are equally scared of their life getting better as they are scared of their life getting worse. Because for most people growing up, when they had too much fun, their parents often got them in trouble. Okay. Like I like to ask people, if you were jumping on the couch, screaming, having fun, eating Cheetos and just being a kid, how did your parents typically respond? And typically it was stop, get off the couch, and so sometimes our nervous system then internalizes this right before life gets better, or when I'm having a really, really good time, I'm going to incur pain.
Hmm.
We use mindfulness to help people reflect into, well, is there any area of your life you're limiting? Because maybe you're attaching a past story to the present moment that's actually keeping you from enjoying more of life. And without the ability to be mindful and to be attuned and curious to how someone relates to those old stories and how they're intersecting with new stories. I think one of the biggest ways mindfulness could be utilized more is not just healing and dealing with and examining and reflecting on painful stuff, but also why people are putting a glass ceiling over their head and keeping
Mm-hmm.
themselves from doing more.
Mm-hmm.
That's
That's
another way
interesting.
in any given session, or and of course we
Yeah.
use mindfulness in group settings. I mean, and there's other interventions that we use that are all mindfulness rooted, right?
Well,
So
and that's the other thing that I love is that it's really a complement to so many other things, right? It's not just a one size and, kind of a one path. It's a collection. And I know all of us who are in the capacity to serve others want a lot of things in our back pocket because everyone's a little bit different. And I think you're right. The common thread in all of them is some element of mindfulness at the end of the day. So, yeah,
yeah,
cool. Well, I love that. Um, yeah, and I don't think people always think about how they hold themselves back from actually succeeding. Yeah,
and
the fear associated with that, which seems so odd.
yeah,
Like you wouldn't think we would limit ourselves. It just doesn't make sense, and
it
yet
makes
we do.
me think of the poem by Marianne Williamson, "Our Deepest Fear." And
Mm,
if no one's heard that poem, go look it up. But she basically says, she talks about how our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. That's the first two lines of her poem. And, imagine if from when you were in your developmental stages, your nervous system was trained to shut down when you were enjoying life too much. Because more than likely, unless you just had really, really perfect caregivers, if you ever just had too much fun, it was usually shut down. And a lot of times before a lot more data came out on how to, I believe, properly discipline children, a lot of the modalities were to spank them or to send them into their room. And so we trained their nervous systems, unfortunately, that have too much fun, get in trouble, and now you're separated from people until you calm down and then you can come back. And so for a lot of people, when their nervous system kind of hits the rev limiter, they think the next shoe is gonna fall. Okay, it's like, oh, I can't imagine life getting any better. Okay, or another common phrase, and Robin, I'm sure you've said this as the mindful
mm,
Yoda that you are. I'm sure that when you're holding one of your grandchildren and you're squeezing their cute little cheeks and you're like, oh, I just can't believe how cute you are. Like, oh, I just can't stand it. You're so cute. Like, that's part of that's actually your nervous system is bouncing off that rev limiter because it's like, I just can't comprehend how cute you are and how much I
mhm,
love you, and
mhm,
so, but I really do believe that there is this infinite love that we can tap into. And so for a lot of people, they are holding themselves back and they will never figure out their fear of success until they're mindful enough to even begin that journey. And so I've helped a lot of people radically change their marriage, radically change their friendships, their love life, their income potential, their health potential, their self-expression, everything, because we've used mindfulness to help unravel some of the crud, but then we've also used mindfulness to help increase the size of the container that they live in. And so and just I encourage anyone listening to this to then ask themselves that same question. Have you ever said something like what I just said? Like, oh, this ribeye is so good, I just can't stand it. That's your nervous system limiting you. Okay, it's your nervous system is actually saying, that's as far as we go. And so because you might have a deep internalized story that if life is too good, something negative might be right around the corner. I mean, what is stage fright? Think about what stage fright is. These people get these opportunities to stand in front of tens, hundreds, thousands of people, and all of a sudden they can't function. It's the same thing. They can function in front of five, but not 500. What's the difference? Well, how much love, like one of my mantras, and Robin you really helped me understand the power of a go-to phrase.
mhm,
And I'll share another one here at the end, but one of my mantras that another mentor taught me, another person that's versed in mindfulness is, I have a nervous system that can withstand unlimited amounts of positive energy. And sometimes I tell it to people and they're like, huh? And I'm like, well, really think about what I just said. I have a nervous system that can withstand unlimited amounts of positive energy. And until they're willing to mindfully look within and figure out, huh, like how much love can I give and receive? And we call that another way that we talk about that's called intimacy capacity, especially in marriage, is how much love can you give and receive with your spouse or your partner? If it's low, then when they try to pour into you, then your container will just leak it all onto the floor. Mindfulness increases the container so that more love can be poured in. Because if you're not mindful about the holes in your container or the small size, then when other people try to pour in, you'll never catch it all.
Or even when we try and pour into ourselves and love ourselves,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
And I'm a firm believer that generally you cannot do for others what you cannot do for yourself.
Yeah.
And so one of the most powerful things I've learned in mindfulness is to be mindful of, okay, if I'm having a hard time forgiving someone else, am I actually having a hard time just forgiving myself? Or through mindfulness, I've learned that if I've had a long day and I come home and I'm maybe critical of Rachel, my wife, I want to first look back and go, okay, I notice that I'm being critical of Rachel. I wonder if I'm being critical of myself. I wonder if there's something criticism in here that I haven't dealt with, and I'm avoiding it by seeing it in her, which is also projection.
Sure.
It's the amount of application is limitless.
Or
I
is your mental energy on empty?
Yeah, right. Is my
Because you didn't
battery low? Yeah,
because you didn't sleep last night and you've had a tough day. I mean, there's a lot of things, yes, that we can be curious about and
yeah, and
help
just
set ourselves up.
yeah, and just remembering too that the brain's default is negative.
Hmm.
It takes less energy to be negative. Okay,
Right,
and honestly, it takes less energy to be a victim than it takes to be responsible and optimistic.
right.
And so even when I that brain fact 10 plus years ago, just like, okay, being aware of, I might have a tendency or a predisposition to be negative, but that's just my brain trying to keep me alive.
Right.
Well, your brain's job is not to make you happy, it's to keep you safe. Okay, the heart, the spirit, the soul wants you to be happy, and we got to be mindful enough to keep the brain in check.
Yeah. Yeah. So, quick question, and I always love to ask people this. What are your go-tos? What are you finding right now, in your, arsenal of things that you do for your own self-care to be helpful for you right now?
I have a pretty extensive routine of kind of my self-soothing tools. But one thing for sure, I use a lot of breath work. I use a lot of vagal stimulation. So, and that just starts with learning how to go, hmm. So everyone listening, if the deeper you can,
Mm,
yes, get that
love it.
nerve going. I do a lot of breath work. I do a lot of vagus nerve. I could say I do a lot of meditation. I don't think the average person can meditate for a whole lot longer than about 7.2 minutes. But I kind of pray,
Well,
meditate.
then we know you don't need to. You
Right,
don't need to.
exactly. And so, I remember back in the day, and older schools of mindfulness thought it was, hey, 45 minutes a day, and you'll be great. And people were like, it's not that much. It's 7 minutes a day would radically change your life. But I pray and meditate. I do those in tandem, sometimes overlapping. Um, a lot of my go-to phrases, especially if I notice that I'm feeling stressed, or if I notice that I'm maybe allowing maybe fear or uncertainty kind of consume me, I go back to a mantra that Robin, you taught me probably close to 10 years ago, and that's I've been here before and it all worked out fine. Meaning when it comes to stressful situations, mainly the unknown. I think especially for me, as I consider myself a pretty masculine man, I don't like the unknown because I want to be able to protect and provide for those that I love and that are under the service of my care. And so you had walked me through this process. It might have even been on one of our more certification coaching calls of being able to say, I've been here before and it all worked out fine. And so that's definitely one of my go-tos as well. And yeah, and then I spend a lot of time outside. I believe that being in nature is fundamental to anyone's health. I believe that standing barefoot in the dirt is really, really important. Um,
Yeah.
I have a lot of stuff. I
Yeah.
mean, I also do
Sure.
ice
Yeah.
baths,
That's
red
good.
light, and but
Sure. Yeah. No, that gives us an idea. And I love those go-to phrases. I mean, and when you talk about uncertainty, I don't think it matters who you are, how confident, how secure, how successful. I think uncertainty generally is difficult for all of us.
yep,
That unknown, which is again why mindfulness is so powerful because uncertainty is the future.
yep,
So we are certain about this moment right now. And so we can come back here and just rest in the peace of that, even when there's a lot of things when we look ahead that are uncertain. So
yeah.
yeah,
In fact,
love it.
that's another go-to for sure. Is in another mentor of mine coined this phrase of presencing as a verb
Yeah.
is coming back to, and you've always said this, it's just as a way to say it, coming back to the present moment. So I notice if I'm
Mm,
sitting or if I'm feeling myself getting, into a, I almost said diffused physiological arousal. That's more like flipping your lid. But getting myself into this state of just anxious is like, okay, Austin, let's return back to this moment because this is the moment that matters the most. And I think that if even the average person could learn how to presence themselves more,
well,
even that shift alone, would be worth a lifetime, of
changes everything. Changes everything. It really is. It's a gift. Yeah, it is. Well, as we kind of wrap things up, and I know you and I could probably talk for hours about our shared passion. What would you say to anyone or a coach or a therapist or anyone who is in a place of serving others about, you know, adding some credentials around mindfulness to themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that having the Live Mindful certification as a not only as a credential, because credentials are cool, certifications are cool. They help people that are in the general public who don't fully understand kind of the spectrum, right? It helps them understand like this is a person that takes their practice seriously, they take their work seriously, they take their ability to serve others seriously. But the felt sense of not just having a surface level understanding of mindfulness, but a deep felt sense and personal
Mhm.
experience and personal testimony is vital, I think, to any person who's doing life coaching, marriage coaching, therapy, counseling. And Robin typically won't just blatantly brag about herself, but I mean, people need to understand that Robin and the team behind Mindful Momentum have been responsible for training other therapists and counselors and psychiatry teams and psychology teams at school districts and corporations. And I mean, it has amazed me how many times we have been in front of other people of high, psychology industry, related positions and are training them on mindfulness like it's almost the first time they've learned it. And again, no judgment to them. It just is what it is, right? Is that mindfulness to this depth is not really available in very many places. And so, especially if you're a coach, a therapist, a counselor, whatever level and or type that you give in service to others, you could not go wrong with this certification, and not just for all the training, but also the camaraderie, the proximity to Robin. If you get close to Robin, your life's going to get better. Um, your osmos, just being in her
Oh,
presence will change.
you're sweet.
So,
Thank you.
any
Well,
to do that.
and I would like to say too, I mean, granted, it is our curriculum, but I also feel like what lends itself so well is that it's such a Western approach,
Yes.
right? It is that simple integration into a busy life. It's not this heavy meditation or separating ourselves or adding something to our life. It's about embedding it into those micro moments that we all have. And so I feel like it's so doable and attainable for any of us,
Yeah.
no matter where we are. So I think one of the things that really sets it apart from perhaps others. But
Yeah.
anyway,
So good.
Thank you so much for being here, Austin. It's always a pleasure to visit with you. If people wanted to contact you, how would they reach out to you?
Oh man, I would say the best place would probably be to go to consciouschristianmarriage.com. That's probably the most up-to-date website that you'd be able to get a hold of me through is consciouschristianmarriage.com. There's a contact page on the website. You can fill out a form and we can get connected.
Yes, and the work you're doing in that space is just beautiful for marriages all over the country. So as we wrap up, of course, the Mindful Momentum podcast is here to inspire and empower your journey, toward living mindfully. And so feel free to like, comment, subscribe, share, all the stuff. Feel free to contact us at mindful-momentum.com. And I'll see you next time.
Thank you, Robin.